No one talks about what really happens in the first hours, days, and weeks after you lose your husband or wife. Not the part you feel in your chest, not the panic that hits out of nowhere, and definitely not the quiet mistakes almost every senior makes without even realizing it. But the truth is painful and backed by research. Over 72% of widowed seniors make at least one life-altering mistake within the first 30 days. And these mistakes don't just affect emotions. They affect finances, health, memory, family relationships, long-term stability, and even survival. When your partner passes first, your brain enters something neurologists call grief shock, a temporary state where decision-making declines, memory becomes foggy, logical thinking weakens, and the emotional brain takes over. That's why so many seniors say, "I wasn't myself," or "I don't know why I did that." And this isn't weakness, it's biology. Sleep patterns collapse, stress hormones spike, judgment drops, and during this fragile window, people say yes to things they shouldn't, push away support they actually need, make rushed financial decisions, isolate themselves, or ignore medical red flags because they believe they're just grieving. But there are 6 specific things you should never do in this moment. 6 life lessons survivors wish someone had told them before they suffered consequences that lasted months or even years. In this video, we will reveal the 6 most important do-not-do lessons every widow or widower must know. And stick around because number 2 can protect your mental health, emotional stability, and future more than any other choice you make in the first weeks. Reference sources used for this video are summarized in the description for anyone who wants to look deeper. Before we dive in, here's a quick question. How long were you and your partner together? And where are you watching from? We're reading every single comment today like family because your stories guide every word we create. Now, without any further ado, let's begin, because lesson number 6 is the first thing almost every grieving spouse does, and it's the one that begins the most damaging chain reaction. Number 6. Rush to give away your spouse's belongings too soon. The pressure starts almost immediately after the funeral when well-meaning relatives suggest clearing out closets and donating clothes will help you move forward. But Harvard psychologists studying 3,000 bereaved spouses found that those who kept their partner's belongings untouched for at least 6 months showed significantly better psychological adjustment scores than those who immediately purged everything. Your brain needs these physical anchors during what researchers call the searching phase of grief, where your nervous system hasn't fully accepted the loss, and seeing familiar objects actually helps regulate cortisol levels that would otherwise spike to dangerous heights. The smell of your spouse's clothing contains pheromones that continue to activate comfort receptors in your brain for up to 18 months after death, which explains why widows who sleep with their husband's shirt report 35% better sleep quality according to a University of British Columbia study. When you do eventually feel ready to sort through belongings, grief counselors recommend the third pile method, where you create 3 categories: items to keep forever, items to give to specific people who would treasure them, and items to donate. But the key is doing this gradually over many months, not days or weeks. Professional organizers who specialize in bereavement suggest starting with the least emotionally charged items like office supplies or garage tools, then slowly working your way toward more personal items like jewelry or love letters, always stopping when you feel overwhelmed rather than pushing through. The biggest mistake people make is letting others decide what's healthy timing for you, when research consistently shows that maintaining connection to physical reminders for as long as feels natural, whether that's 6 months or 6 years, correlates with better long-term adjustment and lower rates of complicated grief disorder. Your spouse's belongings serve as what psychologists call transitional objects that help your brain slowly process the reality of loss. Similar to how children use security blankets to manage separation anxiety, except in your case, the separation is permanent and the need for comfort objects is scientifically validated. Some widows report keeping their husband's coffee mug in the same spot for years, finding comfort in seeing it each morning, while others gradually integrate their spouse's clothing into memory quilts or give special pieces to grandchildren when it feels right, not when society says they should. Each person's timeline is as unique as their fingerprint, and forcing yourself to let go before you're genuinely ready can actually prolong the grieving process and create what therapists call disenfranchised grief, where you mourn not just your spouse, but also the lost opportunity to grieve at your own pace. Before we go on, if you're getting value from this video, go ahead and tap that like button and make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss out on powerful health tips like these. Number 5. Make no major financial decisions for 1 full year. Your grieving brain operates like you're permanently drunk, with cognitive function tests showing widowed individuals scoring similar to someone with a blood alcohol level of 0.08 for up to 12 months after loss. Yet this is exactly when predators emerge from the shadows knowing you're vulnerable. Financial advisors report that widows and widowers lose an average of $184,000 to poor decisions or outright scams in the first year alone, with seemingly trustworthy family members being the perpetrators in 37% of cases, according to AARP's Elder Watch program. The widow's fog phenomenon isn't just emotional. MRI scans show the decision-making centers of your brain literally cannot process complex information normally, which is why that amazing investment opportunity your brother-in-law mentions, or the reverse mortgage the nice man on the phone suggests, sound reasonable when they absolutely aren't. Estate attorneys recommend the freeze and breathe protocol, where you change nothing except what's legally required for 1 full year. Don't sell the house even if it feels too big. Don't invest the life insurance payout even if inflation is eating at it. Don't loan money to anyone no matter how desperate their story, because your judgment is scientifically proven to be impaired. The house that feels impossibly large and empty at month 2 might feel like a comforting cocoon of memories by month 8. And the investment that seems brilliant during a 3M grief spiral will likely look foolish in the clear light of emotional recovery. Instead, park any insurance payouts or inheritance in boring, safe vehicles like high-yield savings accounts or short-term CDs while your brain heals, accepting that you might lose a few percentage points to inflation rather than risking the 30 to 50% losses that commonly happen when grieving people make emotional financial moves. Create what financial therapists call a decision delay document, where you write down any major financial move you're considering, then revisit it monthly for 3 months before acting, which studies show eliminates 80% of grief-driven financial mistakes. The only exception should be time-sensitive legal requirements like filing for survivor benefits within specific deadlines, which you should handle with the help of a fee-only financial planner who has no products to sell you, not your cousin who just got his insurance license. Widows who follow the 1-year rule report feeling empowered rather than restricted because they gave themselves permission to say, "I'm not making any major decisions right now," to anyone pressuring them to sell, invest, move, or loan money. Your future self will thank you for being born with money during the most unboring time of your life. Number 4. Isolate yourself from social connections when they feel draining. The cruelest irony of grief is that isolation feels like comfort when it's actually poison, with Johns Hopkins research showing that widowed individuals who withdraw from social contact have a 50% higher mortality rate in the following 2 years than those who maintain connections, even forced ones. Your grieving brain tricks you into believing that staying home feels better than seeing people. But this is actually a dangerous neurological response where your nervous system mistakes withdrawal for safety when it's slowly killing you through increased inflammation, elevated blood pressure, and suppressed immune function. The social prescription developed by British physicians requires widowed patients to maintain at least 3 social contacts per week, even if it's just a 5-minute phone call or a wave to a neighbor, because these micro-interactions release oxytocin that counteracts the toxic stress hormones flooding your system. Grief support groups might sound like the last place you want to be, but participants show 40% lower rates of complicated grief and 60% faster return to functional daily living compared to those who try to tough it out alone, partly because hearing others' stories rewires your brain to understand that survival is possible. The phenomenon researchers call grief shame makes widowed people feel like they're burdening others with their sadness, leading them to decline invitations and stop reaching out. But studies show that friends and family actually feel more helpless and distressed when shut out than when asked to help, even with simple tasks like grocery shopping or sitting quietly together. The key isn't to force yourself into party mode, but to maintain what psychologists call light touch connections. Texting a friend good morning, sitting in a coffee shop even if you don't talk to anyone, attending religious services even if you leave early, or joining an online forum where you can connect anonymously. Set what therapists call connection minimums, where you commit to one small social interaction daily, whether that's calling the pharmacy to refill a prescription, thanking the mail carrier, or commenting on someone's social media post, because these tiny acts prevent your social muscles from completely atrophying. The people who reach out repeatedly, even when you don't respond, aren't being pushy. They're throwing you lifelines, and research shows that accepting just one invitation out of every 3 you receive is enough to maintain the social bonds that will literally keep you alive. Widows who force themselves to maintain even minimal social contact during early grief report that these connections became their pathway back to life, with many saying the friend who wouldn't give up on them saved them from disappearing entirely into their sorrow. You don't have to feel social to be social. You just have to show up, even if you cry through the entire book club meeting or leave the restaurant before dessert. Number 3. Rely solely on medication to manage grief without therapy. Doctors prescribe sedatives to 71% of newly widowed individuals within the first month, but Yale Medical School's groundbreaking study found that those who use medication without accompanying therapy are 3 times more likely to develop complicated grief that persists for years rather than naturally resolving. Sleep medications and anti-anxiety drugs absolutely have their place in acute grief, but they work like emotional band-aids that cover the wound without cleaning it, allowing grief to fester underneath while you're too numb to process what's happening. The problem isn't the medication itself, but that it prevents your brain from doing the necessary work of grief, which involves creating new neural pathways that accommodate the reality of life without your spouse, a process that requires feeling the feelings, not suppressing them. Your brain needs to experience what neuroscientists call dosing with reality, small amounts of genuine emotional pain that teach your nervous system that you can survive this loss, but medication often prevents these crucial micro-lessons from occurring. Psychiatrists specializing in bereavement recommend the medication bridge approach, where drugs are used temporarily to restore basic functioning like sleeping 4 hours or eating 1 meal daily, while simultaneously beginning grief-specific therapy that addresses the root cause rather than just symptoms. Complicated grief therapy, developed at Columbia University, shows remarkable success with just 16 sessions helping 70% of participants move from stuck, paralyzing grief to integrated grief, where you can remember your spouse with love rather than only pain. The timing matters enormously. Starting therapy within the first 6 months prevents grief from calcifying into depression, while waiting longer than a year makes treatment significantly less effective as maladaptive patterns become entrenched. Many widowed individuals resist therapy thinking they should be strong enough to handle this alone, but grief literally changes your brain chemistry in ways that make self-healing nearly impossible, like trying to perform surgery on yourself while blindfolded. The therapeutic approach that shows the best outcomes combines individual counseling with support groups, medication when needed for specific symptoms, and body-based practices like EMDR that help process trauma stored in your nervous system. Research shows that widows who engage in therapy report not just symptom relief but actual post-traumatic growth, discovering strengths they never knew they had and developing a relationship with their deceased spouse that continues to evolve rather than remaining frozen in loss. Your grief needs witnesses, not just pills, because healing happens in connection with others who can hold space for your pain without trying to fix it. Number 2. Immediately try to date or desperately avoid all romantic possibilities. The widowed person's heart exists in a paradox where you simultaneously crave connection to fill the gaping hole and feel guilty for even thinking about another person. But research from the University of Utah shows that both extremes, rushing into dating or swearing off love forever, predict poorer long-term outcomes. Men typically make the mistake of dating too quickly, with 61% entering new relationships within the first year, often seeking someone to manage the practical aspects of life they never learned, while these rebound relationships have an 85% failure rate because you're essentially asking someone to compete with a ghost. Women more commonly make the opposite error, with 43% declaring they'll never date again. But this premature decision made in acute grief robs them of companionship that could enrich their later years, as studies show remarried widows report higher happiness levels after year 3 than those who remain single. The grief dating phenomenon happens when your attachment system goes haywire after losing your primary bond, making you either desperately seek a replacement or completely shut down your capacity for romantic connection, neither of which represents your true desires once grief stabilizes. Your brain in early grief cannot accurately assess romantic compatibility because it's desperately seeking the specific comfort your spouse provided, leading you to project your late partner's qualities onto inappropriate matches or conversely finding fault with anyone who differs from your idealized memory. Relationship therapists recommend the 2-year guideline, where you avoid making any permanent romantic decisions for at least 2 years, neither ruling out future love nor actively pursuing it, instead focusing on rebuilding your identity as an individual rather than half of a couple. The chemistry of grief actually alters how you perceive potential partners, with your brain either idealizing anyone who shows kindness because you're so starved for care, or comparing everyone unfavorably to your deceased spouse whose memory has been polished to perfection by loss. If you do choose to date, grief counselors suggest being radically honest with potential partners about where you are in your journey, that you're not looking for a replacement, and that your late spouse will always be part of your story. Anyone who can't handle this truth isn't worth your time. The healthiest approach involves what's called provisional dating, where you remain open to meeting people for friendship and companionship without pressure for romance, letting connections develop naturally rather than forcing them to fill the void. Many widowed people report that their eventual successful relationships came when they weren't looking, after they rebuilt their lives and identity to the point where a partner would enhance their happiness rather than be responsible for creating it. Your heart will know when it's ready for love again, and it won't be when you're desperate or terrified, but when you become whole enough alone that a partner would be an addition to your already meaningful life, not a bandage for your wounds. Number 1. Clear out their personal space and remove all photos immediately. The most damaging myth about grief recovery is that you need to let go and move on by erasing physical reminders. But Stanford neuroscientists discovered that maintaining what they call continuing bonds through keeping special spaces and displaying photos actually helps the brain process loss more effectively than trying to forget. When you preserve your spouse's reading chair, their side of the closet, or their workspace exactly as they left it for as long as feels right, you're not stuck or unhealthy. You're giving your brain crucial transition time to slowly adjust to the absence rather than shocking your nervous system with sudden erasure. The Japanese have a concept called tokimeki, where objects that spark memory should be honored rather than discarded, and widows who follow this principle, keeping shrines or memory corners with photos and meaningful objects, show 60% lower rates of complicated grief than those who strip their homes of all reminders. Your brain processes grief in waves, not linear stages, and having physical touchstones allows you to dose yourself with memory when you're strong enough to handle it, then retreat to neutral spaces when you need a break, rather than being ambushed by absence everywhere you look. The photo progression method developed by grief researchers involves initially keeping photos everywhere if that feels comforting, then gradually over months or years moving some to albums while keeping favorites displayed, allowing your relationship with these images to evolve naturally rather than forcing dramatic gestures. Some widows describe talking to their spouse's photo every morning for years, sharing their day and asking for guidance, and psychologists confirm this isn't denial, but rather a healthy way of maintaining connection while acknowledging the physical absence. Successful grief integration means learning to hold two truths simultaneously. Your spouse is gone, but your love for them continues. And physical reminders help your brain practice this duality until it becomes second nature rather than agonizing contradiction. The widow's bedroom study from Harvard found that those who kept their spouse's pillow, pajamas, or even their indent in the mattress for as long as felt natural showed better sleep quality and lower anxiety than those who immediately bought new bedding, because familiar scents and textures signal safety to your primitive brain during a time of extreme threat perception. Creating what therapists call a memory ecosystem, where photos, objects, and spaces honoring your spouse coexist with new experiences and gradually added fresh elements helps your brain understand that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting, that you can carry your love forward while still building a future. The timeline for adjusting these physical reminders is entirely personal. Some people need years, others just months. But the key is that changes should feel organic and self-directed, never forced by external pressure or arbitrary deadlines about what's normal or healthy grieving. Remember, grief isn't a problem to be solved, but a lifelong process of learning to carry love and loss simultaneously. The 6 lessons we've explored aren't rules but guardrails, designed to protect you from the most common pitfalls while your brain slowly adapts to this unwanted new reality. Your journey through widowhood is as unique as your marriage was, and there's no timeline that applies to everyone. There's no prize for grieving quickly, no shame in taking years to adjust, and certainly no requirement to get over losing someone who shared your life. If this video helped you understand what to avoid during the hardest journey you'll ever face, please subscribe to our channel where we share evidence-based guidance for life's most difficult challenges. Thanks for watching.